Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Ruth Cabal, sitting in for Pinky Webb. Today on the program, President Rodrigo Duterte is set to decide new quarantine status in Metro Manila and other regions. Experts recommend longer GCQ to prevent COVID-19 spike during the holiday season. And with more activities being allowed amid the coronavirus pandemic and the challenges brought by blended learning, senators push for the return of limited face-to-face learning. We also get an update on the proposed 2021 national budget. Senator Imee Marcos joins us live. Amid the rise of COVID-19 cases in the country, Metro Manila mayors met Sunday to discuss their recommendations on the quarantine status in the region for December. President Rodrigo Duterte and the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases are set to make the announcement on the new quarantine restrictions later today. Meantime, senators are urging the Education Department to consider resuming face-to-face classes in some areas. Let's go straight to the source of the story. Senator Imee Marcos. Good morning, Senator, and nice to have you with us.
Yes, good day. Nice to see you again, Ruth. And that's right. We're awaiting the new rules on the GCQ and the modified GCQ here in Metro Manila. I'm in Ilocos, of course. I'm a little bit removed from all of this. But the truth is, what I think we're beginning to see is that we need to establish the parameters nationally, but declare the quarantines locally. That is to say, iba-iba yung sitwasyon. Here in Ilocos, our incidence very low, very isolated, and to a large part from the outside. Whereas in Metro Manila, infection continue to rage, and there seems to be some spikes where places have opened. So to my mind, perhaps it's time for the national government, rather than imposing the quarantines themselves, to establish parameters that are determined by our doctors and scientists, and thereafter allow local government officials a certain leeway, a certain degree of independence, so that they can react quickly on the ground and make changes as necessary.
So for now, Ma'am, what you're saying is you want easing of restrictions in certain areas where, you know, there's already low transmission of COVID-19 cases, like what you're saying in Ilocos. Ano po bang,
Exactly.
yeah. Ano po bang status dyan?
Because, we know that we have had the earliest, longest, arguably the most expensive lockdown in the world. The economy simply can't afford it. Our families are really ailing, and certainly our job seekers need to get out and start pounding pavement. It's a real issue. So I think without jeopardizing anyone's health, without threatening anyone with infection, I think it's about time that we start localizing, as it were, to the smallest degree, to the smallest space possible, quarantines. They cost too much. We can ill afford them.
In connection with easing restrictions, we already mentioned earlier that some senators, including you, would want to resume face-to-face, limited face-to-face classes. Can you tell us more about that? What's the rationale behind that, Senator?
That's right. I know people like you, for example, who are teaching, have had a great difficult time trying to reach their students. To my mind, it's already been proven, particularly in the elementary grades, that the school, the classroom, is not a super spreader by any means, and teachers and students can work safely within the bounds of the classroom, given the strictest, highest standard protocols. If those are in place, the face mask, the physical isolation, conducting classes in the outdoors or even in large public spaces like auditoriums and theaters, perhaps we can start opening our schools. I was completely shocked that cockpits and other gambling venues were allowed open, but schools were not prioritized. The cost also, psychologically and socially, has been tremendous. I know so many mothers who were compelled to give up work because they had to attend to 3 or 4 children at home who also had an ailing parent. It was just too much as the default caregiver to carry on working. So it's been a real setback for women's employment. Secondly, our teachers are really at a loss trying to distribute those modules, trying to copy the modules, produce remote classes, and at the same time accept that there will be gaping learning gaps that they'll have to fill upon the resumption of classes. Most depressingly, of course, are the suicides we hear about. Suicides, whether correctly or incorrectly ascribed to DepEd, only highlight, only underline the terrible mental health threat that no classes, no socialization, lack of peer contact has brought. And of course, all of this redounds to that great digital divide, which simply has widened the already major fissures in our society between the rich and the poor, the connected, the isolated, the enabled, and the completely incapable. This is an impossible situation. Let's open the schools now.
So you say, I was going to ask you about that, sabi niyo, let's open the schools now. Kasi ang question ko sana next, Senator, is when do you want classes to resume? By January po ba? But this will need a lot of preparations, like what you mentioned. Maybe the venue should be in the bigger, not in the classrooms, but in the coliseums or in the maybe school gyms or something like that. So you need to make a lot of preparations for that. Challenge din po yan.
Wes, I think it's more of a combination. I don't think we're going back to in school at any time soon, and I don't think this is for everyone. But certainly in areas like the Cordillera, in the mountain regions, where there has been very little infection, or even perhaps in the island provinces in Mindanao, where the infection has been so low, it's almost negligible. Perhaps it's time to open up the schools. And once again, having been governor for so long, I think we should leave it to local wisdom in many, many cases, to the Parent-Teacher Association, the local school board, perhaps the officials, for example, even in the barangay, who have committees on education and the kagawads and counselors in charge. Let them make the decision in conjunction with the DepEd. And let's not do and enforce a one-size-fits-all policy. Clearly, in areas where the infection has rampaged over the past few months, it's out of the question. Pero sa mga barangay, na alam naman natin, dinalakad lang naman yung eskwelahan. At alam naman natin na mas madali para sa mga bata magsipunta sa mga eskwela. I think the preparations will be even much less than these impossible modules that are substandard in many, many cases, totally rushed, kulang-kulang. Yung mga nanay, di maintindihan at hindi mabuo. Tapos yung mga teacher naman natin, hirap na hirap, house to house pa nila dinidistribute kung ano-ano na lang ang ginagawa nila para matawid ang tubig, makaakyat ng mga bulubundukin. Apakahirap ng sitwasyon ngayon. Palagay ko, yung blended learning, yan na talaga ang new normal. Kumbaga, mag-umpisa tayo sa 2-3 oras sa isang linggo sa ating mga classroom. Kasama pa rin ng module, kasama pa rin siguro ng ating mga Wi-Fi at remote learning kung kakayanin.
Kumbaga, what you're saying, yung scenario is parang several days in a week na face-to-face. I mean, gradually, you know, having face-to-face and blended learning pa rin with the modules and other computer classes. Ganun po.
That's right. Pero sa palagay ko, lalo na sa lower grades, hirap na hirap talaga yung mga bata na wala silang nakikitang teacher. Parang masyadong nadidiskaril yung kabataan natin. At yung mga nanay, talagang awang-awa na ako. Di malaman kung anong gagawin. Wala naman silang tablet. Kung nasa tuktok ng Cordillera, sino ba naman ang may wifi doon? Hindi naman kami abot kung minsan. Imposible talaga. Kung 3 yung anak, bibili ka ba ng 3 tablet? Kakayanin ba? 3 laptop? Naku naman, napakahirap naman ito.
Ma'am, pero yun kayang, the Vice President has a project of community learning hubs. What do you think about that to complement yung blended learning? Although the DepEd is saying hindi authorized yung pag-set up ng ganito.
Yes, dapat hindi natin ipolitika. Step 1, yun na muna, no? Kaya lahat ng effort ng sino man na gusto tumulong, talagang tanggapin natin. Ako, bilang working mom almost my entire lifetime, talagang naniniwala ko that there should be a designated area with Wi-Fi where the modules are available and where the kids can go and just pick up their stuff. Pero kung bababad sila doon, mukhang mahirap-hirap yata. Kung yung learning hub ika nga, marami kaming ginawang ganyan in the poblacion areas, in the municipio areas. We set those up in order for the parents and the children to be able to access learning materials, download them from the internet, and so on.
Okay.
But to establish a quasi-classroom where children and teachers are attending school for hours on end, I think that would be quite dangerous.
I just want to go back to that statement, Senator. You were saying, wag ipolitika. Bakit po? Bakit po connected to the learning hubs is the issue of wag po nating gawing politika or bigyan ng politika yaan?
Well, palagay ko, this is a work in progress. This is a very, very difficult time for everyone. So to my mind, anyone who's willing to help should be welcomed with open arms, and all good ideas should be piloted, should be tried. Ako'y bukas na bukas dyan at tuwan-tuwa ako na tumutulong ang bawat isa.
Okay, briefly before we take a break and go to another topic, ang sabi kasi ni Secretary Briones, President Duterte will decide about the face-to-face classes. Do you want to talk to the President about this and push for this proposal?
Mulat sa poll, ayokong sarahan yung mga eskwela, no? So from the very beginning, I've been very vocal, and the President's fully aware of all these different opinions. And I suppose in his time and in his great political wisdom, he will make his decision. But for me, the sacrifice, the suffering, and the damage that has been wrought by the closure of schools is much, much greater than the actual threat of infection. So kapag timbangin natin, talagang wala sa lugar. Dapat buksan na kahit sa ilang lugar lamang, kahit isang oras pa lamang, umpisa na natin. Kawawa ang mga bata.
All right. The ball is now with the Senate for the passage of the 2021 national budget. We'll ask Senator Marcos about her take on the budget as chairperson of the Economic Affairs Committee. Don't go away. The Source will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today is Senator Imee Marcos. Senator, you will be part of the Bicameral Conference Committee for the 4.5 trillion peso budget, the proposed budget. Can you give us a timeline and then what scenarios are we looking at? Ano po ba yung nakikita niyong possible contentious issues?
Well, para sa akin talagang dapat matapos ito bago magpasko. Kasi talagang kailangan ng tao natin. I think in the beginning, when the NEP or the National Expenditure Program was presented, I have to be candid. Medyo nagulat ako kasi parang busy ang dating. Busy ngayon talagang before COVID. Hindi siya ganong responsive. So I think that's the real effort to make it a more COVID-responsive budget para makatulong in all ways. Unang-una, syempre, yung health at yung procurement ng vaccines, which until today, nakatenga pa rin yung budget. At nakita rin natin yung kakulangan sa economic stimulus. So, as the committee chair of the Economic Affairs, I've seen the horrific numbers of the damage in our economy. And I'm determined to push for a more aggressive, quicker, and tougher stimulus in the budget itself. So this is where we are. The usual haggling between Congress and the Senate, as it were, is between the parochial interests of the district congressmen, which I understand very well. Ang tagal-tagal kong congressman. So ang timbang ng bawat congressman, ano yung mga project na nauuwi mo. So I think they have every right to fight for their districts and make certain that everyone gets their fair share. Pero sa kabila nito, there's the great overarching national interest that we must respond quickly and comprehensively to this virus in all its phases, whether in the health arena or in the economic area where terrible things are predicted.
You mentioned about yung parochial interest because you, of course, you were saying you understand na may mga local district projects na gusto talaga ng mga congressmen, and that could be quite contentious. But do you think House Speaker Velasco would repeatedly say walang pork barrel kasi diba yung some of your colleagues are talking about that, no? Do you think pork barrel free na talaga itong 2021 budget?
Well, kung minsan hindi ko rin naintindihan yung pork barrel because very many of these local or district projects are part of the National Expenditure Program. In many cases, they're even part of the Build, Build, Build. So, wag na nating hatulan na masasama lahat yan o lahat racket. Yung iba dyan talagang kailangan na kailangan. Ako, I for one, I'm from Northern Luzon, but pinaglalaban ko yung mga Mindanao projects for the simple reason that they're so far back. There's a great deal of catch up. It's simply been an overdue historical injustice. Kailangan tulungan talaga yung Mindanao to catch up with infrastructure. So hindi ko ipagkakait yan at hindi ko tatawagin pork barrel. Kailangan nila yan eh.
So depende, what you're saying is depende pa rin dun sa certain projects. Anyway, naka-line up naman yung, naka-line item naman yung mga ganyang projects.
Tama yung Ruth. Kasi tinignan naman yan ng DOTR, halimbawa, ng DPWH. Talagang bahagi na siya ng national expenditure. Hindi na natin matatawag na pork yon. So, para sa akin, naintindihan ko talaga yung mga congressman. Tagal-tagal ko, mas matagal akong congressman at governor kesa sa senador. Ramdam ko. Pero at the same time, I think what we will be trying to do as a united group, medyo may commonality ngayon because of the urgency of this pandemic. And I think what we will be trying to do is not to have business as usual or BC pre-COVID programs and projects, but a more responsive budget that very clearly addresses the issues. Halimbawa yung vaccine. Hanggang ngayon, 8 billion lamang ang nasa DOH. Kakarampot lang yan kung tutuusin. You need 2 doses. Ang mamahal ng vaccine kapag yung Pfizer, nasa halos $40 per shot. Tapos may mga cold chain pa na mga freezer na dadalhin. Paano natin ma-afford yan? Yung Astra-Moderna, $4 nga. Pero ang sabi nila, minamanufacture daw sa India. Sa India pa lang, ubus na. Paano tayo niyan? Kaya I think it's very important that we put money aside for the vaccine. Right now, we're all unhappy. Ako, diskumpiyado ako dun sa sinasabing 55 billion pero nasa unprogrammed. Kapag unprogrammed, ala chamba yun eh. Kasi wala pang pera dyan eh. Depende kung makakolekta ng maraming buwis. Paano naman makakolekta? Hirap na hirap ang negosyo ngayon. So these are things we'll have to address. Yung isa pa, for me,
balikan ko yung sinabi niyo about the unprogrammed appropriations for the vaccine. Kasi ang laki ng difference ng sa House, they appropriated 8 billion pesos. And sa Senate, you have 54 billion, you're saying nearly 55 billion. Yun nga po, so where do we get the money? Kasi nakalagay dyan from unprogrammed appropriations eh.
Yes, where do we get the money? That's going to be the bone of contention, I believe. It won't be the usual parochial, national wrangling. I think that the bone of contention will be where to carve out the sums that we need for the vaccine and for some kind of an economic stimulus or social protection program. At least for me, those are the main issues. Right now, we put the unprogrammed 55 billion for vaccines. Wala pang final, hindi ko pa nakikita yung final amendment ni Senator Sonny Angara. So balik yun ang pinagkasunduan na nung nakaraan. Pero kapag sinabing unprogrammed, ibig sabihin nga, depende to kung maka-jackpot tayo. Kung hindi gumasto sa pag-uutang, yung mga bayarin natin sa interest, kapag nakakapag-kolekta yung gobyerno ng maraming income tax na mukhang naman napakalabo, kapag hindi nagastos, yung mga kung ano-ano. So we are looking, at least in my case, I am really looking at the DOTR, which has so many unspent funds for right-of-way, for example. Even the DPWH, ang daming unspent. Medyo mabagal talaga ang gastos kasi yung mga tao ayaw kung minsan payagan na ilatag yung mga kalsada at tren sa kanilang lupa. So yung right-of-way, ang konti-konti na nagagastos year on year, nasa 25% lang. Abay, lipat na natin yung 75% at bigyan na natin ng proper budget yung ating DOH or kung sino man ang magpo-procure ng vaccine. Ito pa, yun pa yung isang problema. Sa kabila ng kagustuhan natin na bigyan ng malaking budget yung DOH at PhilHealth, na kung tutuusin, sila dapat ang in charge, napakarami namang skandalo, corruption, racket na nababalitaan. Nakakadismaya rin. Kaya sabi nila, PITC, tagilid rin ang
May
record
problema
nun.
din,
Kaya
yeah.
saan ba natin talaga ipagkakatiwala itong bilyon-bilyon para sa vaccine?
Okay, Senator, another one that I would like to talk about is yung safeguards naman for COMELEC that apparently there are some provisions na nawala doon sa proposed budget, no? So we will go back to that later. We will just take a break. And also, some areas in Cagayan are again flooded because of rains and the release of water from Magat Dam. After this break, we'll ask Senator Imee Marcos what else can be done to prevent this from happening again. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Stay with us. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today is Senator Imee Marcos. Senator, I just want to go back to the statement on the procurement of the vaccines, diba? Lumabas na rin sa Senate hearing yung problema sa PITC, and you also mentioned that. Tingin nyo who should be in charge of procuring the vaccines? Kasi sinabi na rin ni Secretary Roque, depende kaya vaccines are Galvez. How do you think the process should be?
Yes, that's right. We're really hard put to try and figure out which one. Ang fallback natin parati PITC kasi sila yung trading company ng ating pamahalaan. On the other hand, there's also DBMPS, which is also the procurement service of DBM. But both don't have very stellar reputations right now at marami rin kapalpakan. So we're really hard put to make a choice. I think we should finally settle on one of them and thereafter determine that once the FDA approves the vaccine, tutukan natin ng todo-todo yung protocols, yung procurement process, yung tenders, yung bids, lahat yan. I think the whole country has to be on it, and they should be transparent, and most of all, they should be accountable. It's very, very important, not only at the procurement level, but even in the distribution level, because then we'd have to rely on DOH and perhaps the local governments to make certain that it reaches the most priority, the highly vulnerable, high-risk groups. That will be another very difficult determination at which we have to try and work together. After all, how can there be a local solution to a global problem? So I've been calling on the RCEP, the ASEAN, to which we belong, to come up with a global price ceiling, as well as perhaps a waiver in certain cases of copyright and patent, so that they can be manufactured here in Bulacan, in our pharmaceutical factories, and not simply in these distant countries where distribution will be exceedingly difficult.
Senator, you're
be
also
at the end of the long queue. That's the other problem.
Yeah, oo nga. Senator, you're also chair of the Committee on Electoral Reforms, and there were reports na meron daw some amendment doon sa proposed budget about waiving procurement safeguards for the COMELEC. Can you tell us more about this?
I think that's a very, very dangerous precedent, and we're very, very scared of that sort of thing. Ayoko nun. I've been very, very vocal about the fact, like our Senate President has, that other companies should bid, and we shouldn't be completely dependent on Smartmatic as we have been in the past elections. We should open up the procurement to other companies and make sure that they qualify. And in many cases, Smartmatic apparently was the only one that qualified. I think there can be solutions to that. We open up the bidding and make sure that everybody has a fair shake. But to waive all the procurement laws, I think that's a very, very dangerous thing, and we're not in favor of that at all.
Pero meron nga po bang ganon? And saan po kaya nanggaling yung ganong proposal to waive tests for certifications and for the security of the equipment and other materials for the automated elections?
I think I'm not the only person in the Senate nor in the country who's had doubts about the Smartmatic contracts and their monopoly over the equipment, over the software, in many cases in so much of the procedure that our electoral reform entails. So palagay ko, talaga namang panahon na pakinggan rin natin yung iba't iba pang kumpanya, baka mas okay naman sila. At sa palagay ko, yung ating COMELEC, bukas naman ang isipan nila tungkol sa tinatawag na hybrid election. Diskumpiyado kasi tayo, lalo na sa mga barangay, ang mga presinto, na hindi nakikita yung tara-tara, yung talagang binibilang doon, yung mga boto. biglang sinusubo na lang natin dun sa machine, tapos ala-chamba na lang kung anong lalabas, nagugulat na lang tayo, pati yung mga bumoto, parang, asan yung boto namin? So, I think these are things that we'll have to work out.
Okay.
We've tried to start with a live, with the reenactment, as it were, and also a live run-through of various proposals. And I think we'll be ready shortly to propose a hybrid system.
Okay.
Automated pa rin yung balota, pero at least at the precinct level, mas transparent yung bilangan ng boto.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Source. Thank you very much, Senator Imee Marcos. I'm Ruth Cabal.
Thank you very much, and good luck to all of us for this holidays and for the next budget, that it will respond to all our people's needs. At marami sanang ayuda at tulong sa bawat isa. Maraming salamat sa CNN po.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm Ruth Cabal, and you're watching CNN Philippines.